Welcome to the deep dive. So, today we are really getting into some complex territory, looking at Robert Greene's, well, let's call infamous text, The Art of Seduction. Now, the sources we've pulled together, they make it pretty clear this isn't just about dating advice or anything like that. Greene actually frames seduction as the ultimate soft power, like an essential skill for influence, attraction, and really getting people to willingly say yes, whether that's in your social life or maybe even moving things forward strategically at work. Our mission today is to kind of unpack this blueprint. We want to pull out the core rules, look at the different player types he describes, and break down the four main phases of this whole process. It's definitely dense stuff and unapologetically Machiavellian in tone. So let's dig into the psychology.
Yeah, and it's important right off the bat to get the context. The sources really highlight its ruthless reputation. I mean, that comes from Greene taking a very amoral stance. He looks at it almost scientifically, The seducer is the operator, the strategist, and the target is, well, he calls them the willing victim, or just the person whose attention and desires being carefully managed. So our goal here isn't to judge it, but to neutrally analyze this framework. Really focus on the psychology of attraction and control that's presented in the material.
Absolutely. It's a blueprint for understanding, maybe, human vulnerability.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we get to the players, the archetypes, we need the ground rules. What's the absolute foundation for this kind of influence, according to Greene?
Right. He lays out 6 core requirements, and they all hinge on subtlety, on psychological games, not force. The first 2 are really key. Number 1, it must be indirect, always. If the target feels like they're being pushed or directly chased, it breaks the spell. The approach has to draw them in subtly so they feel like it's their choice to engage.
That idea of needing indirect means that sounds like it takes serious effort, right?
Yeah.
You can't just blunder into this.
Exactly right. Which brings us to rule number 2. Focus on emotional depth, not just raw lust. Lust fades quickly, Greene argues, but lasting influence. That needs psychological surrender. It's rooted in things like obsession, maybe confusion.
Deeper emotions.
Deeper emotions, exactly. Seduction works by stirring up desire, vulnerability, these complex feelings that stick around much longer than simple physical attraction.
Okay, so how do you keep that complex emotional thing going?
Well, that leads into the 3rd and 4th principles. 3rd is using the power of mystery. Crucial. Never give them what they want immediately. You have to withhold satisfaction sometimes, create tension, make them curious. The second you satisfy all their desires, the game's over. The pursuit ends.
Right. Keep them guessing.
Keep them guessing. And the 4th ties right back to the effort you mentioned, being other-centered, completely. If you're just talking about yourself, looking for validation, you fail, flat out. Successful seduction, according to Greene, needs this deep, almost clinical understanding of what the target fears, what they lack, what they secretly desire. The focus has to be entirely on them.
Okay, so we've got subtlety, emotional depth, mystery, and this intense focus on the other person. What about the last 2? What completes this foundation?
The 5th principle is time. It has to be gradual. Rushing things, well, it just creates this fleeting desire, like a flash in the pan. Real influence needs time to build those deep emotional connections, let the target sort of sink into the experience. And finally, number 6. This is the tricky one for many people. The seducer has to embrace what Greene calls ambiguous morality. Basically, be willing to overlook conventional ethics if they get in the way of achieving the desired goal.
Okay, quite a foundation. So if that's the rule book, let's look at the players. The personality types who are maybe best suited to use this soft power. Greene says there's no single best way, right? You have to find what fits you naturally. Let's start with maybe 2 that are built around fantasy and desire. The Siren and the Rake. The Siren archetype. That's about exaggerated femininity or masculinity even. Offering this intoxicating escape, right? They captivate by tapping into pure fantasy, radiating this powerful sexual energy. They promise freedom from the mundane, pulling in people who secretly want to lose control.
Yeah, pure escape. The Rake, though, works differently. Their power comes from this relentless, almost overwhelming passion for the opposite sex. Now, they might be totally disloyal, maybe highly amoral, but that sheer intensity makes the person they're pursuing feel uniquely, deeply desired, maybe for the first time ever. The target becomes the center of this all-consuming devotion, and strangely, the potential risks, the danger, that just adds to the thrill.
It's that laser focus that's so powerful with the Rake. Okay, moving to maybe the more subtle psychological types, the dandy and the coquette. What's the deal with the dandy blending gender traits? Why is that effective?
The dandy. They seduce using ambiguity. By mixing masculine and feminine qualities, they kind of reject those rigid traditional social roles we all live with, and that appeals directly to a target's hidden desire for freedom. They represent this intriguing lack of definition, suggesting that, hey, if you're with them, maybe you can escape those boring labels too.
Interesting. And the coquette, the ultimate game player, is that right?
Oh, absolutely. The coquette is the master of delay. That's their main weapon. They use that hot and cold dynamic, giving hope one minute, then pulling back, frustrating the target the next. By seeming unattainable, by withholding satisfaction, they build this deep emotional fixation. It's all about the promise of desire that's never quite fulfilled. That's what creates obsession.
Okay, so you've got these archetypes who are naturally suited to this. But then there are the opposites, the anti-seducers. These are the traits that just kill any potential for this kind of influence, right? They break those foundational rules we talked about. Let's start with the brute and the vain person.
Right. The brute, well, they violate that core principle of subtlety. They're impatient, they're pushy, aggressive. There's no room for mystery or that slow buildup. Rushing it kills the attraction because the target doesn't feel like they're choosing it. They feel pressured.
No space to breathe.
Exactly. Then you have the vain person. They just constantly need admiration. Every conversation somehow circles back to them, their achievements, their problems. This completely breaks that critical rule of being other-centered. I mean, if you're only focused on getting validation for yourself, how can you possibly tune in to the target's inner world, their lacks, their desires? You just can't.
Yeah, that lack of external focus just makes them repellent in this context. The third type, the miser, feels particularly bad because it's like an internal emotional stinginess.
Oh, absolutely. The miser isn't just tight with money. They're stingy with emotions, with energy, with attention. They're afraid to risk anything, emotionally speaking. They hold back. It creates this feeling of, well, emotional dryness. Greene actually flags this as maybe the worst anti-seducer because they repel people through this closed-off, fearful vibe. They're the total opposite of the emotional depth needed for influence.
And the last killer trait, the moralizer.
Ah, the moralizer, judgmental, preachy. They try to impose their beliefs on the target, always trying to correct them or judge them. It makes the other person feel restricted, hemmed in. Seduction, in Greene's view, thrives on this promise of freedom, of acceptance, even of transgression, maybe. The moralizer just shuts that down by trying to fix the target instead of, say, appreciating their uniqueness or playing with their desires.
Right, that contrast is stark, offering freedom versus imposing judgment. Okay, so now let's shift focus. We've talked about the seducer style. Now let's get to the core of the strategy. Understanding the target. Because success here seems entirely dependent on knowing what that person lacks or craves or fears. Let's look at some key personality types defined by what they're subconsciously looking for.
Yeah, we're hunting for those emotional vulnerabilities, those openings, like nostalgics, for instance. These people are driven by this deep longing for the past, maybe a perceived golden age. So to influence them, you need to offer them a taste of that lost world. You position yourself as the one who can bring back what they feel is gone forever, like embodying their nostalgia. Exactly. Then you've got the escapists. They feel trapped, stuck in the mundane routines of life, yearning for adventure, for something different. For them, the seducer needs to be the doorway. You present yourself as a route to excitement, to liberation from whatever constraints they feel. And seekers, well, they're always looking for someone to fulfill a specific, idealized fantasy they hold. If you can figure out that fantasy and embody it, you become their perfect match.
So you're building this detailed psychological profile, combining what they crave with what makes them vulnerable. Greene also talks about victim archetypes, people who are susceptible because of specific traits. The strategy here is really about exploiting a unique emotional weakness, isn't it?
Precisely. It's about finding that specific lever. Take the prude, for example. They're obsessed with keeping up appearances, terrified of scandal. So the way to seduce them, according to this framework, is to offer the thrill of doing something forbidden, the allure of secret pleasure. You appeal to that part of them that secretly wants to break free from those tight social rules they've set for themselves.
Playing on that internal conflict.
Exactly. Another key type is the disappointed dreamer. These are people who, maybe they once really believed in grand romance, big adventures, but life hit them hard. Now they live in a harsher reality. They desperately need an escape, or at least a reminder of that fantasy. The seducer comes along and offers them a taste of that big romance, that dream they thought was dead.
Like reigniting a lost spark.
And finally, The starstruck or worshiper. These individuals are always searching for someone to put on a pedestal. They're kind of perpetually dissatisfied with normal people. So to succeed here, you basically have to become the object of their obsession, embody those amazing qualities they're constantly looking for in others, let them idealize you.
Okay, that brings us to the actual playbook, the process. Greene breaks down influence into 4 pretty distinct phases. It's a journey, moving the target from just being interested to, well, complete psychological surrender. And these are definitely strategic principles, not just random tricks. Phase 1 is the awakening of desire. Goals seem simple enough. Grab their attention, pull them out of their everyday life, and just occupy their mind constantly. You start by picking the right target, maybe avoid people who are totally career-obsessed or just emotionally shut down. Then you start using ambiguity. Those mixed signals we talked about, alternating warmth and coldness, keep them guessing.
Yeah, and a really key action in this phase is to create desire by highlighting what they lack and then position yourself as the answer. But, and this is crucial, you don't satisfy it. Not yet. You frustrate that desire just enough to keep them hooked, thinking about you, trying to figure you out.
That sounds like where that famous tactic comes in.
Creating a triangle. Absolutely. This is often where it's used. By bringing in a third party, real or imagined, you generate tension, jealousy, a sense of competition. It works because, well, we humans are social creatures. We're often drawn to what other people want. It instantly makes the seducer seem more valuable, more desirable, because the target feels like they have to compete for your attention.
Okay, makes sense. So moving into phase 2, lead them astray. The target's interested now, maybe intrigued, but the connection's still kind of fragile. The goal here is to lead them so far down the emotional path that turning back feels, well, impossible, or at least really awkward.
Right. You start to intoxicate them. Use suspense, maybe more poetic language, subtle flattery, but crucially, you avoid anything too real, any confrontation that might break the spell. And the psychological trick here, Greene calls it the illusion of control. You disarm them by strategically showing weakness sometimes or vulnerability. This lets the target feel like they're the one in charge, maybe even feel a bit superior, so they drop their guard, they think they're leading the dance, but really they're sinking deeper and deeper into the connection you're building.
And to make sure they're really adrift, the strategy includes isolation.
Yeah, isolating the target, gently, subtly, pulling them away from their usual environment, their normal friends, their support systems. This increases their vulnerability to your influence. You become their main point of reference, their reality.
Wow. Okay, phase 3, the trap is set. Now we're talking about really deepening the attachment, right? Manipulating core emotions.
Exactly. Now you start stirring up those deeper, maybe uncontrollable emotions. You might do this by fulfilling desires they've repressed for years, or even touching on old childhood wounds, offering comfort and validation in a way that makes them regress emotionally, becoming dependent on you.
This is also where the taboo comes in, offering something forbidden.
Yes. Introducing something forbidden, something slightly dangerous or socially disapproved of. This taps into primal curiosity, raw desire. It makes the whole seduction feel like this thrilling, daring adventure, a secret just between the two of you that nobody else gets.
Creates a powerful bond.
A very powerful bond. And to keep that intensity high, you need the emotional roller coaster. See, constant niceness, constant pleasure, it just leads to predictability, boredom even. So Greene advises occasionally injecting elements of doubt, a little fear, maybe some jealousy. These ups and downs keep the target engaged off balance. It makes the moments of pleasure when they arrive feel much more intense and satisfying.
Okay, brings us to the end game, phase 4, the final move. This is the decisive shift, moving from all this emotional entanglement to physical intimacy. You set the stage for the final act once their mind is totally consumed.
That's right. And often, just before that final move, you might actually intensify the desire one last time by creating a short period of distance, a little withdrawal. It makes the target feel that thrill of the chase again, makes them actively pursue you. Then you shift communication. Less words, more visceral stuff, body language, tone of voice, things that bypass their logical brain and hit their instincts directly.
And the sources really emphasize timing here, don't they? Act decisively when they're vulnerable, when desire is peaking. Waiting too long risks everything falling apart, post-seduction blues setting in.
Absolutely critical timing. And then there's the aftermath. That's strategic view. If the goal is a long-term relationship, Greene argues the seduction never really stops. You have to keep putting in effort to maintain desire. He uses this phrase, reducing the target, which basically means subtly reintroducing those cycles of tension and release, keeping them slightly off balance, preventing complacency, essentially starting the game over and over to keep the spark alive. If, however, the goal wasn't long-term, well, then the exit needs to be quick and clean. Avoid messy endings and lingering attachments.
Okay, so we've basically walked through Greene's entire framework, whether you're thinking about applying it romantically or maybe just understanding influence in a professional setting. It's presented as this structured four-phase process, built entirely on psychological profiling and the controlled creation of desire and emotional dependency.
Yeah, and the core insight, I think, regardless of how you feel about the ethics of it all, is that these tactics reveal some fundamental truths about what motivates us as humans, often things we don't talk about. We crave freedom, we crave sanity, we crave validation, we want to break from the boring routine. The successful seducer in this model simply uses strategy to create the illusion of providing those things.
And that leaves us with a final, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over. Greene argues that for any lasting relationship or even sustained influence, the seduction has to continue. That constant effort to maintain the cycle of tension and release is needed. So if this continuous manipulation, this need to constantly reduce the target, is necessary for long-term attraction or influence. What does that imply about the stability, or maybe even the ethics, of all sustained relationships and power dynamics, whether you're managing a team or nurturing a partnership? Something to think about as you navigate your own world.